This week on Government Matters.
I think the number one thing is it's a lot bigger, but it really kind of changes also the composition of the company's work.
It's a shifting landscape for the services business as CACI scoops up another competitor. What does that mean for 2016?
How did this actually happen without any law enforcement agency knowing about this earlier?
This month's terror attack in San Bernardino, California adds a sense of urgency to the encryption debate. How will Congress respond?
But I think the most meaningful fact to remember here is not only did the numbers rise this year, they rose for the first time in 4 years.
Federal employee satisfaction scores turned the corner in 2015, but they still have a long way to go. Government Matters starts right now.
From ABC 7 and News Channel 8, this is Government Matters.
To our viewers around the world on the American Forces Network and here in the nation's capital, thanks for joining us. Government is the engine that runs this city. That's why Government Matters. Every week we'll bring you the top headlines in tech, security, and management. I'm your host, Morris Jones. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson says President Obama will announce a new terrorism threat alert system in the coming days. He told Defense One it will reflect the current environment and the current realities. But top national security officials are increasingly worried about the threats they don't see due to encryption. Marcy Gonzalez reports.
The FBI dive team searching a pond near the site of last week's terror attack in San Bernardino. Officials telling ABC News it is a precaution to ensure no evidence was missed. This as more questions are raised about the suspects who carried out the massacre. Investigators trying to figure out if Syed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik's marriage and online introduction were orchestrated by a terror group with the goal of setting up a sleeper cell here in the U.S.
If it is a situation where they were recruited to get together, then it's logical there are other people in the U.S. and in other locations where this may have occurred.
The FBI saying the suspects chatted online about jihad and martyrdom well before Malik was allowed into the U.S. last year on a so-called fiancé visa.
If we know that now, why didn't we know it then? When she went through this wonderful vetting process.
Officials also reportedly looking into claims made by Enrique Marquez that he and Farouk planned an attack in 2012 but then got cold feet. The 24-year-old accused of purchasing the assault rifles used in last week's massacre is said to be cooperating with investigators as they look into other possible targets, questioning why pictures of this San Bernardino high school were on Farouk's phone, yet having difficulty because the couple encrypted the data on their digital devices.
And that kind of encryption software is easily accessible and free, a major issue, as the FBI director says it's now commonly used by terror groups, especially ISIS. Marcy Gonzalez, ABC News, New York.
In security matters, the push for an encryption commission. This week, House Homeland Security Committee Chairman McCaul told an audience at National Defense University that he plans to introduce new legislation. The goal would be to create a national commission on the security and technology challenges in the digital age. Joining me with more is Aisha Chowdhry, reporter at FCW. All right, Aisha, explain McCaul's bill. What would this commission look like?
Sure. This commission is essentially going to be created once Congressman Michael McCaul introduces this legislation, which will be in January. And this commission is going to have members of the technology community, it's going to have members of the privacy community, law enforcement, academia. They're all going to be included in this with the goal to hopefully come together. And Congressman McCaul has promised this is not going to be like other blue ribbon panels. And, he said it's not going to be something that's established and forgotten, to quote his own words. So we will just have to see how it actually evolves over time once it's goes through the congressional procedure.
Now, there's some debate between members of the Obama administration and lawmakers like Representative Will Hurd about the importance of encryption in counterterrorism. Tell us more.
Sure. Congressman Will Hurd comes from the intelligence community, and so he speaks from experience when he's talking about these issues. And he spoke to one of my colleagues about this, and he supports Congressman McCaul's commission as long as the right people are in the room. And again, that's something that once this legislation is introduced, and once the folks who are going to be on this commission are selected, we will find out more on how that proceeds.
There's another question I've got. What about Federal Chief Information Officer Tony Scott? Where does he fall on the encryption issue?
Sure. He spoke with our editor recently, and he mentioned that that bad folks are essentially going to find a way. They're going to find that backdoor or whatever they need to do to get through.
Well, as Tim Cook with Apple has said, once you release the key for the NSA or the FBI, the bad guys are going to get that too. Now, meanwhile, Incutel, the intelligence community's strategic investor, will partner with Magnet Forensics. It's a company that recovers unstructured data. What does that mean, and how does it relate to this discussion?
Sure, I think it relates to this discussion in the sense that this is an example of collaboration that we're seeing right now play out, and where a technology firm and law enforcement agents, or intelligence agencies, I should say, are going to share information.
Now let's get back to Chairman McCaul. He's also leading a bipartisan congressional task force on combating terrorist and foreign fighter travel. What does that have to do with encryption?
Sure. I think that's something he's very proud of, and he talks about a fair amount. And that is something where you're seeing the visa waiver debate right now on Capitol Hill, and all the 38 countries that are part of it, where anybody who is on that any of the countries that are on that program, anyone from those countries could essentially come here, and their visa could be waived as long as they're vetted through their procedures. And Michael McCaul has been very active in saying that is something that we need to be watching out for, and strengthening that program.
Yeah, the vetting system apparently is not working in the case of California. And let's talk about this month's terror attack in San Bernardino. The FBI investigation has a long way to go, we know that, but we know that the suspects posted a pledge of allegiance to ISIS on Facebook around the time of the attack. They also tried to cover up their digital footprints, but there are a lot of unanswered questions, and here's a big one. How did they go undetected by all the U.S. alphabet agencies, NSA, for example?
That's a great question, and we do not have the answers for that, I don't think. Right now, members of the Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, and Director of National Intelligence are all on Capitol Hill. They're talking to lawmakers from both the House and the Senate side. These are questions that I think everyone wants to know, and it's going to take a while until we find out what actually happened and where did we miss something if we did.
Plenty of people on the radar. As we found out, there are others off the radar. Aisha Chowdhry, reporter for FCW. Thanks again.
Thank you.
The top-rated podcast Serial has returned to the airwaves. The second season focuses on Bo Bergdahl, the U.S. soldier captured by the Taliban, exchanged for Taliban prisoners, and accused of desertion. Serial posted the first episode on Thursday. Steve Nannis has more.
The producers of the podcast Serial say this is the first time U.S. soldier Bo Bergdahl has told his side of the story that commanded the headlines. In the first episode, Bergdahl talks to filmmaker Mark Boal about the moment he encountered the Taliban fighters who took him prisoner after he walked away from his unit.
There I was in the open desert, and I'm not about to outrun a bunch of motorcycles.
Yeah.
So I couldn't do anything against, 6 or 7 guys with AK-47.
He also discusses what his life was like during his 5 years as a prisoner of war, and says he walked away from the U.S. base in Afghanistan to get the attention of military and intelligence leaders.
All I was seeing was basically leadership failure, to the point that the lives of the guys standing next to me were literally, from what I could see, in danger of something seriously going wrong.
Bergdahl was released in May of 2014 as part of a controversial prisoner swap. The U.S. exchanged 5 Taliban detainees from Guantanamo Bay for Bergdahl. The White House welcomed him home as a hero, but Bergdahl was later accused of deserting his unit and endangering the lives of the soldiers who spent weeks searching for him. And now, in a new report, the House Armed Services Committee accuses the Obama administration of misleading Congress and breaking federal law when it arranged that prisoner swap. I'm Steve Nannis reporting.
We'll turn to tech straight ahead on Government Matters. CACI's acquisition of L3 Communications will shake up the services business, but they're not the only game in town. What's ahead for 2016? Inside Defense editor Marjorie Censer joins me next. In Tech Matters, a shifting landscape for the services business. This week, CACI International announced it would spend $550 million to buy a services unit from L3 Communications. Was it a smart move, and what does it portend for 2016? For answers, I'm joined by Marjorie Censer, Defense Business Editor for Inside Defense. Marjorie, tell us more about this deal. What is CACI getting for that $550 million?
Well, it's getting quite a bit. It's getting a lot bigger. For one thing, it really catapults it into kind of this largest tier of services contractors. It's getting about 4,000 employees, and it's getting a lot of intelligence work with, with agencies that handle intelligence matters, and it's getting the capabilities that go along with that.
Now, this isn't their first services acquisition. 2 years ago, CACI spent even more money, about $820 million, on a company called 63 Systems. That's a lot of moving parts. Let's talk about the result. How is the CACI of today different from the CACI of 2 years ago?
I think the number one thing is it's a lot bigger, but it really kind of changes also the composition of the company's work. So for one, this is a company that's been around 50 years, that's done something like 60 acquisitions, but that 63 Systems acquisition was the largest one in their history, and this L3 one is another big one. So, but it also shifts the company's work more toward intelligence, really gets them focused on that line of work beyond just DoD business.
I think that's the trend, certainly. Meanwhile, other major contractors like Lockheed Martin and BAE Systems have yet to sell their services units. Bring us up to date.
So BAE Systems had been kind of shopping some of its services work, and it announced earlier this year that it's not going to sell them. It thinks it's still a valuable line of business, and it's going to hold on to that work. Lockheed, on the other hand, has said it will not be able to make the decision on what exactly to do with its services work before the end of the year as originally planned. But it intends to do something with it and make an announcement early next year. And the chief financial officer said earlier this month he thinks it would be pretty unlikely that the company would hold on to that business. So I think we should expect a pretty big move there.
All right, let's talk about next year. Will CACI's new position in the services marketplace make future spin-offs more or less likely?
It's a little bit hard to say. On some level, as other companies get bigger, there may be pressure on smaller companies to do the same and get bigger. But at the same time, some of these players have done major acquisitions. They've got a fair amount of debt on their plate. They kind of need to, as they say, digest their acquisition and stay where they are for right now. So I think it sort of remains to be seen and is very dependent on the company.
Now, you talk about debt, but these units are still making money. In the end, Marjorie, this is all about profit margins, right? Absolutely.
I mean, L3 said we have to get rid of this unit because its margins just don't fit with our business. At one point, their margins were below 3%. And CACI said this week, look, we think we can bring its margins up very quickly to match ours. We think we have what it takes, and we have sort of the infrastructure to be able to get this business on a better path.
Before you go, put all of this into context for us. Was this a good move by CACI? Will it build their business going forward?
I think CACI executives said this week as they were pitching it that the key is that they've got to execute it. They've got to find a way to bring those margins up. They've got to find a way to make this business work with what they have and use it to grow new work. The key there is turning it into more than just adding revenue, but making it a specialty area, helping it boost the business they have. I mean, one of the things that the CEO said is, look, there used to be some programs out there that we just weren't big enough to compete for. Now, with the scale they are, with about $4.4 billion in annual sales, he says he doesn't think there are any programs that are too big for them to pursue.
We'll keep tracking it, certainly. Marjorie Censer, Defense Business Editor for Inside Defense. Thanks, Marjorie.
Thank you.
In Management Matters, the best places to work in the federal government. For the first time in years, things are looking up. After 4 straight reports pointing to declining employee satisfaction, there's a slight increase for 2015. Joining me with the latest is Sean Morris, Federal Human Capital Leader at Deloitte. All right, Sean, let's start there. On a 100-point scale, federal employee satisfaction hit 58.1. That's a 1.2% increase from 2014. Good news, but in most classrooms, 58% is an F. Put the overall score into context for us.
Well, I think the best way to put it in context, Morris, is to compare and contrast it against what we see in the private sector. The private sector average score is around 76 points, and so there is some distance between the federal score and the private score. But I think the most meaningful fact to remember here is not only did the numbers rise this year, they rose for the first time in 4 years, and they rose to above where we saw them in 2013.
Now, no big surprises at the top. NASA finished first among large federal agencies, and FDIC led the mid-size category. That said, which agencies made substantial gains in 2015?
The one that you'll hear the most about, and I think it's seen substantial gains for the last 2 years, is the Department of Labor. They've put a very concentrated effort, starting at the very top of their organization, into listening to their employees and showing their employees movement forward on what they're hearing. The first thing they did was try to increase the percentage of the individuals that were actually taking the survey that's released by OPM. And that's up over 70% now. Originally it was under 40%, I believe. And you've seen a great uptick for them over the last 2 years.
Meanwhile, morale at the Secret Service dropped to a new low. Your report puts them 319th out of 320 agencies. The answer may be obvious, but what happened?
Well, challenging situation. I think every organization faces both internal and external situations. Obviously, over the last couple of years, they've had a number of different directors in place, and many people know already some of the challenges that they've faced with security at the White House. At the end of the day, I happen to know they and the Department of Homeland Security, where they sit, are making significant investments at the very highest levels to address this. Taking a step back and looking at the organization that they sit in, while the Department of Homeland Security continued to be on the lower end of the rankings this year, they did actually improve in 8 of their 15 subcomponents, which I think is a very positive indicator for the future of that department.
Sean, before you go, I'd like to address one additional finding. Members of the Senior Executive Service, or SES, posted a job satisfaction score of nearly 83 points. That's leaps and bounds ahead of the rank and file. I can't help but think pay has something to do with it. What else contributes to that score?
Well, at the end of the day, if your senior executives are not happy in their job, that's not a good situation. So I actually think it's a very positive situation that their scores are that high. I actually think it tells a story quite the opposite, that pay is not the issue, that they are staying in their roles. There's been significant pay compression in the senior executive service ranks. And certainly many of them could be paid more in other occupations outside of the federal government. And so I actually believe it's an indication that pay is not the major driver for them.
It's good to get all these statistics from you. Sean Morris with Deloitte. Thanks.
Thank you.
The nation's next president could have a huge impact on employee satisfaction. Some candidates voice support for government. Others want to dismantle it agency by agency. The largest federal workers union got off the sidelines this week. The American Federation of Government Employees threw its full support behind Democrat Hillary Clinton. Meanwhile, conspiracy theorists say Clinton also has the support of her chief rival for the Oval Office. Tom Foreman explains.
Democrat Hillary Clinton. Unbelievable. Republican Donald Trump. Fierce front-running foes. But some say, hold on. What if Trump, with his polarizing style, is not running to win, but to split the Republican vote? Maybe Donald negotiated a deal with his buddy Hillary Clinton, Jeb Bush has tweeted. Continuing this path will put her in the White House. And Carly Fiorina?
Donald Trump is Hillary Clinton's Christmas gift wrapped up under a tree.
Trump is spending a lot of time attacking his fellow Republicans.
Marco is overrated. Lindsey Graham, Carly's record, Ben Carson. Cruz is going to have to hit me.
Jeb Bush is so low in the polls, might as well go home and forget it.
That's primary politics. But conspiracy theorists say, what about this?
I was a Democrat for a period of time early on.
That's true. He's donated heavily to Republican and Democratic candidates. He hints he might run as an independent if he doesn't get the Republican nod. And while he savages Clinton now,
Hillary Clinton was the worst Secretary of State in the history of the United States.
listen to what he said before.
I just like her. I like her, and I like her husband.
The Clintons attended his wedding, and their daughters, Chelsea and Ivanka, are pals, all of which drives the conspiracy crowd to wonder if a secret Democratic tunnel is being dug to the Oval Office.
This is a conspiracy. That's what this is.
Like in the Shawshank Redemption.
Big damn conspiracy! And everyone's in on it, including her.
And helping her? That would be very un-Republican indeed.
It's ridiculous with this one.
Tom Foreman. Trump battles a bald eagle. Straight ahead. Donald Trump did not win Time Magazine's Person of the Year. That honor went to German Chancellor Angela Merkel. It's too bad there isn't an award for Best Photo Shoot. Trump would have won by a landslide. Watch.
You gotta go fast.
Yeah. Put your hand out of the glove.
How's my hair?
No good. No good.
No, let it watch it.
That's great. That's great. Almost done here. That's great.
You don't show the aspirin over there. You show the aspirin.
His aspirin.
Which aspirin? We're not doing it again. I'm doing this for the cover of Time Magazine. I love Time Magazine. What you will do for a cover, this bird is seriously dangerous but beautiful.
And that's the latest from Washington. Thanks for watching. I'm Morris Jones. We know your week is filled with other matters. Save this half hour for us.